Hello everyone, Assalamualaikum. So we meet again for this week lecture, which is on evaluating arguments and truth claims. Now, before I move on, I would like to remind you that the previous chapter or the previous topic that is analyzing arguments, and this week topic, which is evaluating arguments as well as claims, they are practically important for your written assignment, in which you will be evaluating articles given in order for you to come up with a good analysis on in assessing the arguments presented in the articles given. So I would advise you to understand these two topics in depth in order for you to come up with good analysis of your written assignment. Now, basically, this is the content for this week. We'll be looking at what is considered as a good argument, or when to consider a good argument, when is it reasonable for us to accept a premise, and also how to refute arguments. Now, when is an argument a good one? So we have learned before this previously in the earlier chapters, where we talk about what is considered as good premises and what is considered as good conclusion. And also we have looked in terms of some theoretical aspects in order to consider what good argument is all about. But we must, before we move on, in order for us to understand what is when is considered as a good argument, we must look at what a good argument does not mean what. Okay, so the first one, a good argument does not always mean that it has to agree with your view. Now, I may have my own view on something, and you may have your own view on the same thing, and both views are different. So just because your view is different than mine, and just because you have presented a good argument about that issue, not necessarily that your presentation of your argument must agree with my view. So all I'm saying here is it may not appear according to your view, but it can be a good argument, if you understand what I'm trying to say here. Number two, a good argument not necessarily has to be persuasive in nature. Just because you see an argument that is very persuasive, everyone is following it, not necessarily that is a good argument. And the third one is, a good argument not necessarily mean that it is a well-written or well-spoken argument. Someone can just write very good with with superb languages, vocabularies, lexicals, premises, sounding and convincing premises, or someone may speak about that argument, may talk, may discuss on it, but not necessarily that they are good arguments. Now, a good argument is basically it satisfies the relevant critical thinking standards that apply in a particular context. Now, let us look at some general guidelines in evaluating an argument. The first question that you may want to ask yourself, are the premises true? Number two, is the reasoning correct? Is the argument deductively valid or inductively strong? So these are the two concepts that we have learned before. And when we talk about deductive reasoning, a valid deduction or a strong induction are considered as good argument. Now, does the arguer commit any logical fallacies? Does the arguer express his or her points clearly and precisely? Are the premises relevant to the conclusion? Are the arguer's claims logically consistent? Do any of the arguer's claims contradict other claims made in the argument? Is the argument complete? Is all relevant evidence taken into account, given understandable limitation of time, space, context, and so on? Is the argument fair? Is the arguer fair in his or her presentation of the evidence and treatment of opposing arguments and views? So these are the questions that you may want to ask yourself in evaluating your arguments. And I just have to say this, these are the key components of your evaluation and analysis of your written assignment. Now, when is it reasonable to accept a premise? Now, number one, the claim does not conflict with personal experiences that we have no good reason to doubt. So it must not conflict with our personal experiences. Number two, the claim does not conflict with background beliefs that we have no good reason to doubt. And of course, the third one is the claim comes from a credible source. These are the three things, the three criteria that you may want to look into when it comes to accepting a premise. Now, I would like you to read on the elaborated explanations and given examples on these aspects on page 169, sorry, 199 in the textbook. Now we have come to the last part of this topic, which is we're looking at refuting arguments. Now, to refute means not necessarily challenge it or rebut or criticize it. To refute means to defeat, to show that the premises do not provide convincing reasons to accept the conclusions. That is basically refuting an argument means. Now, there are two strategies that we may want to employ. The first one is to show that a premise or perhaps a group of premises, they are false and dubious. And number two is to show that the conclusion does not follow from the premises. And in order for you to understand these two strategies, I would like you to read more on basically I have explained this and they are quite self-explanatory, but I would like you to read more on this and also look at the given examples on how the author discusses on these two strategies.